There's two guys my age here, other guys, Guy and Joe. But I wonder if you two, like me, when you were a teenager, you probably spent too much time playing this game. Yes. Do you remember what it was, Guy? Street Fighter 2, yeah? Yeah, Street Fighter 1 weren't all that, but Street Fighter 2 was pucker. Street Fighter was an arcade game, and you'd vow to become the world's greatest Street Fighter. You would travel the globe with each level, and you would face different fighters from around the globe. So Chun-Li, she was Chinese, Ken was American, and Blanca was a green mutant from Brazil. And you'd go around, and each fighter got a bit harder, and the skill level would go up, until finally you'd meet this guy, M. Bison. He was the final boss. Now, M. Bison wasn't from a country. He had no nationality. He, simply, according to the game, was a psychopathic dictator in charge of an international crime organisation called Shadaloo. Who knew? He is, in Street Fighter 2, the final boss. If you beat him, you would be crowned the greatest Street Fighter in the world. Fair enough. What has that got to do with us this evening? Well, turn a few pages over to Exodus chapter 12 and verse 12. Exodus 12, verse 12. Look what the Lord says. I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the gods of Egypt I will, or I have, executed judgments. I am the Lord's. Now, what have we been seeing over the last few weeks? Well, we've seen Yahweh proving to everyone who he is and what he's about. We've touched on this a little bit. Consider the devastating effects that the plagues have had on the Egyptians' religion, on their deities. If Exodus was a video game, Yahweh is the undisputed master. So back in chapter 5, Pharaoh actually asks Moses, who is this Yahweh that I should listen to him? I've got a ton of gods to worship, says Pharaoh. What's so special about your God, your Hebrew God, Yahweh? Well, in the preceding chapters, God has answered the question, hasn't he? So let's do a bit of a recap. Level 1, we met the first God, Happy, the God of the Nile, the God of the Nile flood, the one who brought fertility to the Nile Delta. So what was the first plague? What did God do? Well done, Margaret. The Nile turned to blood. God showed everyone this harp is nothing. I can destroy his water if I need to. So Yahweh destroys Happy or Harpy. Level 2, here comes the next opponent, Heket. Now, what do you notice about Heket's head? She's a frog, right? She's got a frog head. Frogs symbolised life and blessing. One frog can lay hundreds of eggs, can't she? Heket was worshipped as a goddess of fertility and childbirth. So if you wanted to get pregnant, you would pray to Heket. If you wanted a safe birth, you would maybe get your Heket statue out and say a few prayers. So what does Yahweh do? Second plague? Frogs. Heket's blessing becomes a curse. She cannot contain or control herself, it seems. If Yahweh says make more frogs, she listens. She seems powerless to say no. She's defeated. Level 3, we meet Geb. Now, I love Geb. For some reason, he's got what looks like a seagull on his head, doesn't he? It looks like he's been visiting an English seaside town. Geb, though, was the lord of the dust, the earth, the clay on which we walk. Remember what we heard in chapter 8, though, verse 16. God says to Moses, stretch your staff and strike the dust of the earth, and it shall become gnats or lice. So Geb, we find out, when God sends the lice, he's not in control of his own area, is he? He can't control the dust. If Yahweh says, become dust, the dust listens. So Geb is defeated. Level 4, we meet Selket. Now, what do you notice is on Selket's head? What's there? Can you see it from that now? A what? It's not a horn. It's got 2 little pincers. A scorpion, right? She was meant to offer protection from venomous creatures. The same way that Catholics might carry a statue of the saints, the Egyptians might carry a little statue of Selket to protect them. Selket would keep the snakes and the spiders and the bitey insects away. What does God do? What was the 4th plague? Flies or mosquitoes, right? Biting, flying insects. God's saying, look, this Heket can't keep the venomous insects away. She's defeated. Level 5, we've already met these guys a few weeks back. They are Hathor and Apsis, bovine deities. And Yahweh just swipes them aside, doesn't he? He sends a great plague, a disease of some sort, and all of the livestock are struck down. So they're defeated. Level 6, we've got this young lady. Her name is Isis. Now, don't worry, she's not about to re-establish a caliphate or anything. In fact, she was the goddess of healing. If someone is sick, then let them pray to Isis. How effective is she? Well, what was the 6th plague? Boils. Yeah, number 6, you pick at your boils. So let's see how she copes with boils. And of course, she can't cope with the boils. In fact, when Pharaoh's magicians got the boils, they couldn't even stand up. So she's done. Level 7, we get 3 bosses in one, right? 3 bosses need to be dealt with. You've got Nut, Shu, and Tefnut. Now, Nut, she was the goddess of the sky. The Egyptians saw her as the dome on which the sun and the stars were painted. Underneath her, holding her up, was Shu, the god of the air. So he's sort of holding her up so that the sky doesn't fall in. So that's Shu. And then Tefnut, she is the goddess of moisture. Rain, mist, cloud. She decides when they come. These 3, the Egyptians thought, controlled the cosmos. Or do they? What does Yahweh do to undermine them? Hail. He sends hail from heaven. Remember, it was spheres of ice with fire inside of them. So Tefnut and Shu and Nut, they can't control anything. They're defeated. Level 8, this was a plague we looked at last week. We meet an elaborately dressed fellow named Osiris. He was a god linked with food production and crop fertility. He makes the oranges nice and juicy. He makes sure the wheat and the barley grow on time. Or does he? Well, what can Yahweh do to this guy's produce? What did we say last week? Locusts. And they come and they eat everything that's not already been destroyed. So we've got 8 bosses down and we've got 1 major boss to go. We could call him the final boss, the M. Bison of ancient Egyptian religion. Anyone know who that final boss is going to be? You might have heard of him. What did you say, Jen? Ra, absolutely. Yeah, Ra was Ra. He was the sun god. The sun gods. How is Yahweh going to expose Ra? What's he going to do? Well, verse 21. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness to be felt. So Moses stretched out his hand towards heaven, and there was pitch darkness in the land of Egypt for 3 days. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days. But all the people of Israel had light where they lived. Now, it's no coincidence, is it, that this point came up this morning. I didn't plan for darkness to come up twice in one day. Therefore, we've got a reason that God, by his Holy Spirit, wants us to really focus on darkness tonight. What can we say about darkness? Well, it's amazing, isn't it, the lengths to which human beings have gone so that we don't have to live in the dark. Look at this picture a minute. This is a real picture from space of Northern Europe at night. And what do you see? Well, there is light everywhere. Everywhere there are humans, there is light. Each major city is a little blob of orange or white. And look, here's London from space at night. And actually, there's us. Margaret won't be happy someone's left that light on. Every bridge, every road, every street, every house is illuminated. Human beings desire to be lit up. We light stuff up. Think about your home. You've got main lights, haven't you? You've got lamps. You've got automatic lights in your fridge. You've got lights that tell you when the oven's ready. You've got lights by your front door, lights in your garden, lights in your cupboard. You've got lights that are only there because they look pretty. Your phone now has a handy little torch on it, doesn't it? So if you lose something behind the sofa, you can find it. Most cars now have lights so bright it makes driving at night really painful. Pop stars, when they perform, they shower themselves in light, don't they? There's lasers, there's dry ice. They give the crowd bracelets sometimes that light up in response to the music. We love going to fireworks displays. We go into the city at Christmas simply to look at the lights. At sports events, you now get light displays where the floodlights blink on and off to the music. It's ridiculous, but people seem to love it. And when the two teams, whatever sport it is, when the teams run out of the tunnel, you get pyrotechnics, you get fireworks going off, fire. We are obsessed with light. We're like big moths, aren't we? Lights. What's the reason, though? Why are we like this? Question I want you to answer. It's not a trick question. Margaret. Say again? Yeah, I'm talking about the spiritual reason, though. There's a reason we're obsessed with light. What is it? Something to do with our image? We're created in the image of God. Remember, God is light. In him is no darkness whatsoever. Around his throne is a beautiful rainbow, isn't there? Below his feet is a glorious crystal blue sea that glows. Remember when Saul sees Jesus, he's struck down blind because Jesus is so resplendent, so glorious. God created a greater light to rule the day, the sun, and a lesser light to rule the night, the moon. And because he's a God who overflows with beauty and majesty, he painted the night sky with 1 trillion tiny pinpricks of light. Stars, galaxies, planets. We love light, we love looking at light because he is light. But what happens when God removes himself from a place? Well, it's here in Exodus 10, isn't it? God, for a few days, withdraws his general grace from the Egyptian population. See, God is kind and gracious to everyone, isn't he? The fact that we can breathe air, the fact we have food to eat, the very fact that we can see, our eyes can experience light, it's a gift from the Lord's. So here in Egypt, God removes that gift. And the whole of Egypt is sent into total darkness. I think there's a problem for us as Westerners, though. What do you see when you shut your eyes? Well, because we're immersed and saturated in light, even when we shut our eyes, we're still going to see blobs of light, aren't we? Images. That light has left an imprint on your retina. And therefore your brain's trying to make sense of it when your eyes shut. Even if you shut your eyes now, the light in the room will make its way through your eyelids And so you don't see black, you see a kind of grey fuzziness. There's very few times when we're confronted with complete darkness. We visited Chislehurst Caves a few years back, and at one point in the tour, the guide turns off all the lights. And he actually warns everyone. He says, look, I'm about to turn off the lights. Some of you are going to be freaked out. So if you don't want to do it, he tells you where you can go, where there's a light. And then when he turned it off, it's just black. And it's only for 30 seconds, but there's a freakiness there. Now, if after a few minutes he still hadn't turned the lights back on, that residue of light it captured in your eyes would have faded. And then whether your eyes were open or shut, you would have seen nothing but inky, deep black. And that would have been scary. And look at our text. The Egyptians are terrified. They hunker down, verse 23. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days. Why don't we like the dark? Well, it's scary, isn't it? What's hiding in that dark cave? What's down in the dark basement? When you're a kid, you think, what's under my bed? Who might be looking at me through the crack in my wardrobe? And our brains play tricks on us in the dark, don't they? That coat and hat, in the dark, you're convinced it's an intruder. The hook on the wall becomes a huge spider. And the dark is disorientating. When people get trapped in a burning building, they often perish because they can't see through the smoke. They can't figure out how to get out. They can't work out where the exits are. I told you this morning how much I hate leaving this building when the sun goes down. You think, what's back there? As I push this door, what am I likely to find in the other side in the dark? What's lurking back there? We're told in verse 21 that this darkness in Egypt is a darkness that can be felt. Now, scholars aren't too sure what is meant by this. The original Hebrew has a sense of kind of reaching out and groping through the darkness. And remember, there's no trace of light anywhere. They would not have been able to see their hand in front of their face. So for 3 days, they are stuck. You wonder what they ate or how they used the bathroom. It must have been terrible. It must have been terrifying. And of course, we know how long it lasted, don't we? But they had no idea when or if it would end. As far as they were concerned, their religious worldview was concerned, they'd been thrown into the underworld. How did they know they weren't dead? They didn't. All they can hear are whimpers and screams of terror. This thick darkness has no end in sight. Now, I think there's something else we need to understand about the sun god Ra if we're really going to grasp the gravity of this miracle. So in Egyptian mythology, every evening as Ra disappeared beneath the horizon, he would board a boat and he would sail down to the underworld. And in the underworld, he would face his own arch enemy, his own final boss, if you like. And funnily enough, you can see where the echo of this would have come from. Ra has to face a guy called Apophis. He is a giant serpent. And this giant serpent represented chaos and disorder. And all evening, the Egyptians said that Ra would fight with this serpent. They would battle it out for supremacy. The priests of Ra, during the night, would perform rituals to help him out, to give him strength in the battle, a bit like seconds during a boxing match. They'd come and sort of sort his cuts out and give him a little drink and then send him back on his way. Now, crucially, every night, Ra could take on the form of a cat, and he would beat the serpent by stabbing it 7 times. And he'd win, job done. Ra would be victorious, and the next morning, he would rise in the east, ready for a new day. That's what every Egyptian believed. That's what Pharaoh believed. So what must they have thought when confronted with the 9th plague? Ra has disappeared into the underworld, and they know that he's fighting with the Hebrew god Yahweh. And Yahweh clearly has won, hasn't he? Day 1, Ra doesn't emerge. Day 2, Ra is still not there. Day 3, he still doesn't show his face. And think, every day since history began, Ra has always been victorious. The sun has always risen. But not now. Not now that he's been confronted with the Lord, the God of the Hebrews. So understand what this would have done to the Egyptian psyche, to their view of the world. They are thrown into chaos. All of their gods have now been completely undermined. Yahweh has defeated their number one deity. The final boss has been flattened. There is none like Yahweh in all the earth. Okay, second point, and don't worry, it's not as long as the first, the final offer. Verse 24 to 26. Verse 24, then Pharaoh called Moses and said, go, serve the Lord. Your little ones also may go with you, only let your flocks and your herds remain behind. So remember last week, Pharaoh had offered to let just the adults go and serve the Lord. But Moses insisted that everyone and everything had to be liberated. But Pharaoh thinks he'll try a bit of negotiation one more time. He says, okay, look, I'll even let your children go. Your little ones can go. But you need to give us your livestock. You need to keep them back as a deposit. Keep them as a guarantee so I know you'll come back. He still sees himself as in control of this situation, doesn't he? Verse 25, but Moses said, you must also let us have sacrifices and burnt offerings that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. Our livestock also must go with us. And I love this. Not a hoof shall be left behind. For we must take of them to serve the Lord our God. And we do not know with what we must serve the Lord until we arrive there. Moses says, no deal. They're our animals, and we will do with them as we please. And we may well have to offer them as sacrifices to our God. He might request that. So we're taking them. Well, there's an important question for us as believers here tonight, isn't there? Is there any part of your life that you still haven't surrendered to the Lord? There's the famous hymn, isn't there? I surrender all. First verse is this. All to Jesus I surrender, all to him I freely give. I will ever love and trust him, in his presence daily live. There are some people who, when you look at their lives, you can see that they really have surrendered everything to Jesus. You can see that every aspect of their life is geared towards his kingdom. Their own interest, their own enjoyment is tied up in him. Their decision making is guided by their desire to serve him. Their behaviour is shaped by his words. It's easy to sing, isn't it? But Christian friend, are we doing it? The Epistle of James says this, submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Sometimes there are bits of our lives that we will not submit to God's will, aren't there? There are bits of our lives that we've left back in Egypt. Those besetting sins that we want to hang on to. So maybe I'm unwilling to submit parts of my thought life to the will of God's. I wouldn't dream of doing anything physically lustful or adulterous. But actually in my mind, I'm constantly committing adultery. I'm doing it in my heart. Instead of telling Satan to get behind me, I'm inviting him closer in as he tempts me. I'm stubbornly holding on to my sin the way Pharaoh wants to hang on to Israel's animals. Maybe it's my attitude towards money. Maybe it's my resistance to really forgive people if they wrong me. Christian friend, whatever it might be, we've got to ask ourselves tonight, have we surrendered every part of our lives to him? God doesn't just want some of you, he demands all of you. There might be things in your life that he demands you serve him with. God won't settle for second best. Not a hoof must be left behind. Third and final point then, the final farewell. I think in these final verses you can see the psychological damage Pharaoh has been subjected to. We sometimes think of the ninth plague as the mild one, don't we? I know I did as a kid. I'd rather sit in the dark than get boils or have hail fall on me. But perhaps we've never really considered how horrific this darkness truly was. These people have been in solitary confinement for 3 days. They've been given a taste of death. In essence, I don't think this is pushing it, each one has been given a taste of hell, haven't they? What's one of the key features of hell, of Hades? Well, it's the idea of total and utter darkness. And when it's all over, Pharaoh, far from being softened by the whole experience, he is enraged. Verse 27, the Lord strengthens his resolve, and he will not let the people go. There's a rage in Pharaoh, a sort of, how dare he do this to me attitudes. Verse 28, then Pharaoh said to him, get away from me. Take care never to see my face again. From the day you see my face, you shall die. Quite how Pharaoh imagines himself being able to kill Moses is anyone's guess. He's just seen the awesome power of Moses' God, but he's still in denial regarding his true position. What's Moses' response though? Well, verse 29, he grants Pharaoh his wish. Moses said, as you say, I will not see your face again. If you don't want a relationship with Yahweh, then you won't have one. All this time, Pharaoh had been listening to Yahweh's voice, hadn't he? He'd been listening to his commands. He'd even been able to talk back to the Lord's. In talking to Moses, Pharaoh had opened up a dialogue with God. Moses is his intercessor. But now he says to Moses, I'm done. I don't want to talk to you or your God anymore. And Moses says, all right, that's fine. This is the final farewell. And Moses is good to his word. From this point on, he will never see Pharaoh's face again. Pharaoh has cut himself off. Let's tie it up then. What can we learn from this plague? Well, let's ask a question. Was Pharaoh right to be angry with Yahweh? Pharaoh thinks this final plague, this descent into the darkness, these 3 days of sensory deprivation, he thinks to have a taste of hell on earth, no, he says, that's a step too far. To subject every Egyptian to this, that's wrong. To be terrified and horrified for 3 days, to not know how it's going to pan out. For Pharaoh, he says, Yahweh's gone too far. And so he pushes the Lord away. And you know what? We see precisely the same attitude in people today, don't we? One of the key issues I've heard on the street over the years when I've confronted people with the gospel is the issue of eternal punishment. People will say, how can a loving God put people in a place as awful as hell, where it's dark and there's misery for all eternity, just because they've broken a few of God's laws or they don't believe in Jesus? People say that's not fair. In fact, if God is like that, I don't want to know him. I don't want anything to do with him. It's the Pharaoh attitude, isn't it? It's an attitude that says, firstly, I ain't all that bad. Secondly, my sin ain't all that bad. And thirdly, we as human beings somehow know better, and can make better judgments than God. In short, it's a supremely arrogant attitude, isn't it? It's the attitude of someone who's proud and haughty, someone who's got an elevated opinion of themselves. What does Scripture say about such people? Well, simply, God resists the proud. What Pharaoh failed to comprehend was that he and all the Egyptians got exactly what they deserved. In fact, they deserved more than what God gave them. They got 3 days, they got a taste of it, didn't they? They got a taste of something resembling hell. They got a sample. So all right, it was dark, but they could still huddle together in groups. They could comfort one another. Parents could soothe their children. They could still physically eat and drink if they could find foods. And if they'd wandered in the right direction, they could have found a way out. There was light in Goshen. So in theory, make your way to Goshen, you can see again. There was an edge to the darkness. So do you see, there was hope even in the 9th plague. But of course, there's no hope for the soul that's cast into hell, is there? So the answer to our question is no, Pharaoh was not right to be angry with Yahweh. In fact, even here, the Lord is pulling his punches. He's showing mercy. He's showing restraint. But of course, there's something far more glorious that we can't help but mention at this junction. In all of these plagues, as each boss has been defeated and overpowered by the Lords, we're seeing in Yahweh a God who vanquishes all of his enemies, aren't we? A God who shows people that there is none like him in all the earth. A God who says, you shall have no other gods before me, because there are none like me. The Lord is unique, isn't he? He's a God of justice, but, and here's the good news for us, he is a God of love and mercy. There was one foe at this point that Yahweh hadn't finally defeated, and it was death. Death is the final boss. It's everyone's final boss. Because of man's sin, God, in his justice, had to sentence creation to death. Everything that is born in this creation is born to die. But the Lord was determined to reverse that state of affairs, to defeat the final boss. And he did that in a wonderful way, didn't he? He sent his firstborn son, Jesus, into this world. As we've considered the plagues, these rightful punishments against the sin of the Egyptians, the amazing thing is that God himself will take the plagues that we deserve upon himself. He turns his own wrath back on himself and absorbs it for us. On the cross, as we were reminded this morning, Jesus experiences the full weight of God's wrath against sin. He's engulfed by darkness as the Father turns his back on his Son. And unlike those Egyptians, Jesus doesn't just get a sample of what isolation tastes like. He doesn't get a trailer of hell. He gets the full deal, the whole horrific movie played out in full. He drinks the cup of God's wrath down to the dregs. Every drop is drunk. And there's no one there to comfort the Saviour, is there? There's no soothing words from his Father. There's no refreshing drink to ease his pain. And there's no hope of escape. There's no way he can fumble his way out of the predicament. He stays pinned to that cross in agonizing terror for his people. And in dying for his people, he conquered death for his people. The final boss defeated. Final question then, are you one of his people? Darkness and light, there are only two destinations for human beings, aren't there? The unrepentant sinner gets what they deserve. The individual who, like Pharaoh, keeps saying to God, get away from me, I don't want you. I don't want to hear from you. I don't want to see your face. One day God says, fine, you will no longer see my face. But if you do that, you'll have no champion, and the final boss of death will claim you and defeat you. And you'll be thrown into the outer darkness. Instead, there's a way that you can be on the victory sides. You can win by getting someone else to fight in your place. When I was younger, if there was a bit of a game I couldn't do, I'd hand the controller over to my older brother Tom. I'd say, Tom, can you get past this bit? I'm stuck. And he'd go, yeah, sure. Because he was older than me, he knew what he was doing. He'd get me on to the next level. Level complete. Well, that's what Jesus has done for his people. He'll go to bat for you. He'll go to the cross for you. He'll go to the grave for you. And he'll rise victorious 3 days later for you. The final boss of death defeated. I wonder, are you going to join his side?